All the, yeah.
So she was very excited. Just look better. But this is. I mean,
Like I said, I don't have to go there and explain all that stuff. That actually kind of sounds like it was the
something like she. And I'm like, you still have. There's a lot of. But. Awesome. I know. And that was John Paul said it's okay. Yeah.
All right, folks, good afternoon, welcome. So I have not heard otherwise, so I believe that the provost and the president are going to be with us shortly. So we're just going to go ahead and get going with the agenda, starting with the roll call.
My apologies, I'm working through the end of a cold or something, so. That was last December. My apologies if I sound awful. Alan.
Here.
Bellum.
Here.
Bird, Virgil, there you go. Boyd,
Here.
Brock.
Here.
Brian. Who's on?
Here.
Chen.
Here.
Holly,
Here.
Council,
Here.
Dyer,
Here.
Elias. Elliman,
Here.
Elman,
Here.
Fawcett. Fleming,
Here.
Green.
Here.
Griffin,
He is sick, guys.
Hadley,
Here.
Hart. Hildebrandt,
Here.
Hopper,
Here.
Ivory,
Here.
Danson.
Here.
Kazee,
Here.
Khan,
Here.
Kimbrough. Kojak.
Here.
or Kojak, Maggiano,
Here.
Matthews. Mendes. Moon,
Here.
Ofoe,
Here.
Peralta,
Here.
Riker,
Here.
Roberts. Ruffin,
Here.
Schoon,
Here.
Song,
Here.
Feldman.
Here.
Cipriano,
Here.
Swift,
Here.
Talbot,
Here.
Viswana. Webb,
Here.
Wentz,
Here.
Yang,
Here.
Yarbrough,
Here.
Yay,
Here.
Zhao.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you all. We're going to go ahead and get started with our discussion with leadership. So, at your discretion, President Provost, take it over.
Thank you. Appreciate your time today. How's everyone doing? So working on finals, grade papers. I've had an opportunity to talk with a lot of our students at the Winter West. Anyone get a chance to go out there? Breaks cold. Yeah, see a camel, donkey. So it was a great time. My students had a thing. I was at Operation Pass Finals last night. I think a lot of students enjoyed breaking a plate. But I don't have a huge agenda for it. Just wanted to come let you know that we're slated to graduate about 1,500 students next week on Thursday and Friday. About 582 of those are undergraduate students, and the remaining amount are graduate students. And I think that just goes to how well that we're doing here at the university. And if you think about it in a larger context, certainly for those undergraduate students, that are over the course of their lifetime, they'll earn an additional $1.4 million that you've able to help those students transform their lives to the next phase. And I think that's really important as we talk to those students as well as to their families about just kind of successes that we're having. If you recall, I think we had about 4,500 degrees that we awarded last year. So that continues to show the amount of improvement that we're making and getting more students across the finish line. Hopefully we can continue to do that. Obviously, federal government's back up and running. If you haven't heard, right, they approved their spending stuff. And so right now, I'm sure you've been reading about some of the dismantling of the Department of Education. We'll continue to track that and see how that impacts higher education. A lot of that stuff is just being farmed out to other functional areas within the government, but I'm not seeing any impact at the moment. Next week, the the Department of Education, Secretary McMahon's staff, I don't know if she's yet committed to coming or not, is going to be here in Georgia meeting. I know the chancellor's going to be there, and I think the provost is going to attend that meeting on my behalf. I'll be at SAC's conference. So we'll see what new information comes out of that. Obviously, legislative session starts here in the new year, and so we'll continue to stay focused on any legislation that impacts higher education. I remind you, as you start seeing bills being filed, is that thousands of bills get filed every year. Some of those never see a floor or a committee, and so just take a moment and pause if you see something that is impacting higher education, and we'll make sure that we get our government relations folks to take a look at it. And as it has any potential for becoming a larger issue, then we can have larger discussions about it, but keep the system abreast of any unintentional consequences of that. We saw a lot of that in Texas, and so I imagine every session those things begin to impact as legislators look at what other states are doing and try and compare and contrast how we're doing things here in Georgia. So we had a staff holiday party on those days are starting to run together, Tuesday or Wednesday. Had great turnout by the staff. They came and enjoyed coming to the university house, and then that evening we had the faculty holiday party. Pretty decent turnout. Certainly would have liked to see more of the faculty there, but I know it was a new thing that we're kind of throwing out to the audiences. Thank you to Dr. McLean for being there, as well as a number of deans, and I shook a fair amount of hands. I see in the room that were in attendance, and so again, I encourage you to come next year if you didn't have a chance to make that. Other than that, I open it up for any questions, comments, or complaints. But the university seems to be doing good so far. I think everybody's getting ready for the holidays. Just trying to finish up and get out of town. Yes, sir.
It's a curiosity that I have because you mentioned at your inaugural speech the amount of money that you would like us to, and I'm thinking that that's an aspirational number, $50 million get to, right? Okay. Because you started with a figure that I think it was either $500,000 or $715,000 or something like that, and it seemed kind of low to me, especially because I have colleagues in nursing who just recently got pretty large grants over 2
Right.
Yes, we did. Thank you.
3.7.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So, in light of that, it just, the number just like didn't compute in my head. So would you, I'm just asking, do you know how that figure was?
Yeah, absolutely.
What did it include?
So the number was 700,000 if memory serves, and that's again federal research expenditures. And so of course we get a lot of grants that come through the university. Some of those are service grants, right? They're pass-throughs. There's not a huge expenditure portion to that, and so that doesn't really get counted into those figures. Obviously, I know I have faculty from a variety of disciplines, so some disciplines obviously their areas may not bring in those type of research dollars, creative works or whatever that is. And so that particular one obviously is new. It wasn't counted in that figure for that. There's also an accounting question of I will say it's an error. It's just a decision that was made here at the university. I can't speak to previous administrations, but what you'll find is that, depending on the individual faculty, the course release that you have for research, if you can audit that and actually say this time was set aside, a portion of that salary can be used as an institutional expenditure towards research, that can be counted as a part of that number. And that's where you'll see some universities that this year might be at 700,000 and then next year they're at 10 million. And you're like, okay, well, what happened? Well, they started counting those numbers or going back and looking at that. And so we've certainly had a conversation with Dr. Moser in research about, how are we doing that? Same thing. We had this great opportunities with Georgia Best, where we're working with the various, counties. Well, research is being conducted, those students, graduate students are doing capstone projects or dissertation topics that are research specific to that district. And so how can we write that abstract or make sure that it says research, because research is being conducted. So as we continue to audit those things, I think that number can improve. Is that going to get us towards 50 million? It'll take us a lot closer than we currently are. I mean, there's going to still be some heavy lift in there to get towards that. And what I said in the state of the university, I guess this is our first meeting since that, is that towards the goal of that. And so I think, as we begin, what are those steps? What are the things that we need to do to start moving towards that objective? And as I have said in this meeting numerous times, and certainly in smaller conversations, I realize there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be implemented. I spoke with Dr. Moser at length at the faculty holiday event and said, look, I can't talk to the faculty about, hey, these are the things that we need to do. And then they come to me complaining about, OR, or Office of Research is not doing their part, right? Either that's pre and post awards, whether that's the accounting piece of it, because then they're going to complain about, well, this is the hindrance. Likewise, I've come to the provost and said, hey, what do you need? If it's, $1 million, if it's whatever, how can we get more institutional, sponsorship dollars out to the colleges, to the department, certainly for some of those disciplines where, there's some seed money for some grant writing opportunities. I know that some of that has been held back. I've heard from a number of you, obviously as the administration coming out of COVID may have tightened up on some of those resources. How can we begin putting those out there, but making sure that obviously we're getting the ROI on those dollars, and whether that's conference travels, whether that's writing grant writing opportunities, or learning how to be better at grant writing opportunities, or why you didn't get a grant. And so I think we'll start making that progress for that. I don't see this as instantaneous. It's like suddenly everyone's going to just start writing more grants. But as we've said before, I mean, for those of you that are in disciplines where there's those opportunities, then if you're not writing any grants, clearly you're not going to have any opportunities. So I think the national average is that you have to write about 8 grants in order to get one awarded. So it's just a numbers game. And then we could talk about time, or I've had conversations with some colleagues about, well, some schools have graduate assistants or other things, or teaching classes that give me the time to focus on the research, or focus on the grant writing. That's a deeper conversation that we could certainly explore.
Right.
That,
Yeah, that covers it. And I just wanted to volunteer, bring a bunch of grants. Anybody, wants to hear my 2 cents?
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you what I know and how much I don't know. So,
yeah. Any other questions about this?
I have a comment and a request, and it is about money, and it's not for me. This is in the form of startups. About 25 years ago, I did a report for chemistry where we found that for every dollar that was given as a startup to an incoming faculty member, they brought in 10-fold in grants. I don't know what the current numbers are, but it's a fairly large multiplicative factor. In the natural sciences, there is a strong expectation that incoming faculty members will write grants. In chemistry, they have to get a successful grant to get tenure, for example. Incoming faculty members are getting startup funds, but as we are thinking about a very large dollar value, my request to the provost and to you and to the deans would be to give as large a startup as possible to an incoming assistant professor. Give them the gift of time as well so that they can write grants and be successful, and then hold them and their respective programs and departments accountable, that there are strings attached to these incentives. Thank you.
No, thank you. Appreciate that. That's good to say it then. Any other questions, comments? Man, surprisingly gentle today. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Cold, wet Friday. So I'm excited. A week from today, we're going to be doing commencement Friday and Saturday, and really excited about as the president indicated, strong numbers there, looking at student success holistically and improving those numbers of students that are coming through. Just got a couple of updates, and I appreciate, Dylan, you sending some questions, so I'll address some of those. But first, I want to start by thanking our SEM folks for being here in the room. I've enjoyed that kind of combo and also enjoyed that search. Looking forward to that VP joining, so I can wear 17 hats instead of 18. But I've been going around through admissions as well as student success in a number of groups, and had some great conversations earlier today with the admissions folks around storytelling. And my point to them was, they were asking, how do we let students know that are interested in psychology, in theater, in chemistry, in poli-sci? How do we help those students that are prospective know that UWG is the place for them? So it's individual student stories that we're going to be, some of which are going to be sharing at commencement next week, that say, look at this student who studied biology with us, and they had this great experience working with faculty and turning that into an internship or a co-op, and then are now, they've got a job offer before they graduated. So we're going to be upping our game across the next few months around being able to tell those stories. So as you see those questions come out, please brag on yourselves, brag on your students. It's not just the students, but it's also you working with them. And that's going to be one of the best ways we can say and differentiate why you should come to UWG. The phrase, you've got a private experience at a public cost, and being able to show students when they come here, they're not just a number, but that they work with our faculty. I think some of the questions we've had around scholarship, creative activity, research, grants really leans into that. And you all do this really well. So helping students that are prospective know that when they come here, you get that kind of experience. And then inventorying, I think there was a question asked about what is ORSP doing to inventory and give credit towards the breadth and the variety of the work that faculty are doing outside of the classroom is really important to tell. We're looking at ORCID as a potential means of doing that inventory, but I would ask the Faculty Senate to work with ORSP on what is the best way that we can not make you fill out yet another form, but how do we capture the work that you're doing and accurately reflect that in its broadest sense? So I'm really not interested in standing up another web form or survey or making you all fill out yet another thing, but how do we say what you're already doing through annual evaluations or on your CVs? How do we pull that information in and reflect that? And if you, I know ORSP in the past had annual reports, and people would go and look at their name and say, oh, here's, hey, look at me, I got 7 things this past year. And if we left one off, you better believe you were telling us about it, right? So how do we do that in a most efficient way as possible? So if you've got ideas on that, I welcome the Faculty Senate to take that up. And I think, Dylan, on the agenda today, you will have some of that. So looking forward to what comes out of that. Also want to give a shout out to a couple of things that have happened. And I apologize if I'm not mentioning your event. You can correct me and I'll be sure to highlight it either in the Academic Affairs newsletter. But I want to give a shout out to Melissa, Brian, and Andy for a fantastic Mars Expo and everybody that participated in that. If you didn't have a chance to be on the Newnan campus and see, I was pulled into some other meetings, including the Faculty Senate Executive Committee. So we've got lots of demands on our time, but I saw the pictures and I saw the stories. This was a phenomenal event that looked at different disciplines coming together, in particular across Gen Ed. And I think Melissa's looking at taking this at a state level now. So if this wasn't on your radar, I encourage you to look into it and maybe adopt some of those strategies, or at least see how well that went for our students. A lot of good press around that. You've got Winter West and theater with Tiny Tim. I think we sold out just about every seat, or fantastic enrollment or attendance at that. So great work on theater, and all of the folks. I think we've got liquid nitrogen ice cream and crafts, ITS. You've got the Waring Center. Just all of those activities are phenomenal. Dueling pianos last night, and music and performing arts featured so well. This is our 4th year, if I'm not mistaken, and the attendance just keeps going up. I tell people that you're going to see, I was talking with Sharmista earlier today, and in 5-ish years, maybe 7 years, all of these little kids that are coming through now, we're making an imprint on them. so that UWG is their place. And making science and anthropology and all of these things just super fun and accessible. We've got nurse pinning next week. Looking forward to celebrating nursing and all of those students coming across in preparation for their graduation. And then tonight we've got the honors medallion ceremony. So if you have mentored an honor student that is graduating this semester, or that you are mentoring that will be graduating in a few semesters, it doesn't have to be this December. But will you stand so we can recognize the faculty that are doing such a good job of mentoring our honor students? Thank you all. On that winter list and pinning and the honors medallion ceremony, because these are just indicative of that experiential opportunity that you get when you come to UWG. And you can teach whatever the discipline is at different places. There's a great article in the Chronicle about, I think, SEC schools and their enrollment numbers based on that holistic experience that you're getting. So if you haven't seen that, check it out. There was a line in there that stood out to me about you can study X at different places, but students are looking for what happens outside the classroom as a real selling point of distinction. And I think UWG has a great story to tell. So in all of these things that I've addressed, it's what are faculty doing, mentoring students, connecting with, what are the stories that admissions can tell as we're recruiting, honors, medallion, momentum. I think, David, we're hosting momentum, and we were on a joint systems call yesterday. It was almost embarrassing to a point because it was, I was reflecting on the provost meeting. Dr. Fortune was reflecting on the Student Affairs Committee. We were getting a shout out for hosting momentum, and UWG, I think, was named about 5 times in an hour there. Someone made a joke about, we need to look at the ethics of this. Hey, are we featured too prominently? And I share that at a statewide level on this call yesterday with VPs and leaders in student affairs, enrollment management, and academic affairs with the system office staff. UWG is on the tongue of a lot of folks, and we're doing some great work. So kudos to all of you all for setting up that kind of visibility. I'd like to get into some questions that were passed on to me, and then I'll take any others from the floor. The first I raised at the executive committee a week ago about Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes for spring and pre-registering students. As you know, we've standardized the schedule. We're trying to remove friction. And as I shared with you at the last Faculty Senate, we're one of 20 institutions on an Ask You working group around student-centric course scheduling. We pre-registered this Project 909. We've got 909 students that are on campus, living in the dorms, buying the meal plan, first-time, full-time freshmen. And we pre-registered them for classes, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'll say that there were some issues. I think there was an art class that was a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 5 p.m. Not surprising that they dropped that, right? And maybe that should have been coded as a Monday, Wednesday, who knows? I leave it to the faculty to pick, what pedagogically works there. But we had about half of the students that we pre-registered drop their Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedules. They had some choice. We did a survey. We said, okay, what's going on? And some of them said they had an alliteration with a word that goes with Friday, starts with F, and said, yeah, no thanks. And we're constantly pivoting. So you could look at this and say, we lost 450 students that we had pre-registered, but they landed in other sections, and that's great. That's fine. I'll count it as a win because even at only 450 students on these Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, that's still 3 times what we had, or 3.5 times what we had a year ago. So the energy on campus on Fridays, and remember the goal is to keep people on campus through the weekend and just have that energy that's going to snowball into more. Now, are there certain students that only want to come in 2 days a week or fully online or only 1 day a week with hybrid? Absolutely. We will serve those markets. But for those students that we have on campus, we need to serve them as well. And we don't want them departing on Thursday at 3 in the afternoon and not coming back until noon on Monday, because not only are they not leveraging the housing and the meal plans that they're paying for, it's just really hard to maintain that stickiness with those students. So it's not a one size fits all. And yes, students are moving, but I'll say that we're on the vanguard for pre-registering students. And you've heard me say, T-Mobile assumes that I'm still with them month after month after month, right? I don't have to re-sign up for my cell phone plan. they're just going to automatically draft, and I'm going to be a customer for a long time. In the same way, we need to get ahead of, and we need to assume that students are here and pre-register them for classes that we know that they need next semester. If you're in English 1101 this semester, you probably need 1102 next. And just basic things like that presume they will be our students. Dual enrollment, the same thing. Coming out of the admissions meeting this morning, if I'm a dual enrollment student, let me treat you like a UWG Wolf. I don't have to recruit you in. We should assume that you're going to stay here. Now, I don't say assume that you're going to be here and treat you like, yeah, no problem, take you for granted. I mean, I'm going to presume that you are still going to come here. Now, are some going to leave and go elsewhere? Absolutely. Are some students going to not have that effing Friday class? Probably, right? But we're still 3 times better off than we were a year ago, and we're going to continue to snowball on that. Another question that came up is in hiring. We conducted the Vice President for Strategic Enrollment Management search is going really well. We conducted video interviews. Please pencil in, and you'll see this coming out on Monday next week. We will have on-site campus visits on December's 15th, 16th, and 17th, right after commencement, trying to catch people before the holiday break, because we do want to fill this position quickly. Great pool. I think you all will be excited to see these finalists. With respect to the interim deans in the Perry College and in Chass, the charge meetings for those searches will be next week. So we've got the committees, we've got the external members, the positions are being advertised externally in the Chronicle and Inside Higher Ed and other places, and we will launch those publicly on the website very soon. Had a question about the restructuring of College of Education, and for those COE faculty or others interested, please know that that's an idea that has been put out within the college. There's no presupposition on my part or the dean's part, and I applaud Dishman for taking that and just presenting that for, let's talk about how do we scale. I mean, College of Ed and the enrollment there is huge. So how does that work? What kind of administrative structure and support do faculty and students need to make sure that that's successful? But I want to say for the record to make sure there is no predefined plan there. And so the faculty will take that up, provide input, academic and other institutional unit structure by USG policy is defined by the president. We can be advisory to that, but there is no predefinition there. Got another question about periodic dean evaluation. We follow USG policy in that. The group has been formed, and I think the deadline is February 28th. So the committee is formed within COE is the group that's being done this year. Last year was School of Communication, Film and Media and Richards College. So these come up from time to time. We form the committee. Really important that the faculty governance in each of these colleges define who's on that committee. If you need a link to that policy, I'm happy to answer specific questions or point you to that, but that is coming along as well. Last 2 questions, budgetary transparency. There was a question about, we've got accreditation coming up. We need to put in some numbers about our operating budgets and so forth. Please work with your directors, your department chairs and your deans to get that information. If it's not forthcoming, we've got the Faculty Senate Budget Committee, or have we renamed it? I'm going dinosaur old school here, right? The new group, but happy to give you the information that you all need on that. But to the president's point, we have been in contraction for a number of years. We now have additional dollars based on growth, and that state 2-year lag to our budget has now finally kicked in. And so you've seen some of that with increased in operating and professional development. A new set of that, I've asked the deans, give us your one-time needs within FY26. And we are presenting to the chancellor on FY27 budget request. That allocation will go through and be dependent upon legislative budget setting, the governor's ratification and allocation to the USG, and then finally to us. But I do want to connect that question about budgets and resource availability to a meeting that I had with the psychology faculty. I think this came up in anthropology as well, around professional development. And there was a really good question around, I've got a major conference that I need to go to in July, but I'm not eligible to go because we get a call for PD in September, the schools and the colleges allocate that, and it's on a different fiscal year. So according to the faculty in that discussion, there's kind of this dead zone around when you can and can't go to these conferences. I said it at that group. I'm conveying it back to the deans to clarify, and I want to be on record with the Faculty Senate. So please, as leaders in your respective areas, share this. There's no dead time. If you have a conference in July or whenever it is, we can cross that fiscal year cut and split fund. So as you know, we can prepay conference registration. We can sometimes even prepay travel on one fiscal year and encumber in the future year for hotel reimbursement and per diem. So even though it's more difficult, I want you all to know we try to do the right thing first, and then we'll figure out how to make the system and the policies work. The only risk there is we don't have our FY27 allocation. So it's possible that you decide to go and you get travel authorization for a conference in July, which would be the upcoming fiscal year. And then we have a budget cut or who knows what else that happens, right? We'll absorb that because it's really important that you all are publishing and connecting with colleagues in your disciplines, regardless of when that time of year is. President's point at the university address and then reiterated just moments ago about increasing scholarship, increasing grant writing, increasing UWG's visibility, which is not only for institutional reputation, but that influences recruitment. And Monica backed me up, but what I heard in admissions, the meeting, we have more students applying earlier, and our enrollment should continue to go up because people aren't just coming up to recruiting tables and saying, okay, now who are you? They're intentionally coming up to UWG's table and saying, I'm interested in you. You're on my short list because our name is more prominent. And your scholarship and the quality of what they get when they come here is dependent on that professional development. So yes, it might be more difficult to encumber, but that's a high priority. And as we have additional dollars being added in the institution, it's something that I and the other leaders are advocating for. So yes, we might need to hope and encumber dollars that we don't yet have in our pocket, but we're very reasonable in saying that they will be there, and they have been in the past. I understand that that's a risk, but I wanted to clarify that we've got cuts, we've got fiscal constraints and deadlines, but I want to make sure that you all know the system should work for us, and happy to talk on a one-on-one basis and coordinate with you and your dean and your chair on if some things have been prohibited in the past because of timing, let's remove those barriers to get you to be able to do the things that you need to be able to do. With that, happy to take any question. Yes?
Okay, talking about budget, because you said that we might not have the money in our coffers from July 1st. What the schedule is of when we get our money from the USG and when it gets distributed to colleges and then.
Right, I'm not in budget and financial services, so I'm going to give you my understanding, but happy to follow up with the appropriate subcommittee of the Faculty Senate to give more detail. When I say that the dollars aren't here, they have not been allocated officially. So any reasonable person is not going to assume we have 100% budget cut, right? So understand my language is just very conservative. We can't promise dollars that we haven't been allocated yet. We present to the system office in January, based on enrollment and projection, what we believe the upcoming year will be. We might actually grow beyond our expectation, but that gives a general guideline. The state legislators then need to establish a state budget of which the USG's budget is a piece of. The governor then accepts that for line items and so forth. That's then defined and the dollars are given to the USG. The chancellor then allocates on a per institution basis. So it's actually quite late in the fiscal year before we truly get the actual dollars. It's March, April-ish, right, at the early, pending. So we have a reasonable approximation and priorities of where we're headed, but the dollars aren't actually in our pocket until July 1. So if you've got a conference in July 15th, it's not reasonable to say, oh, I'm going to submit the travel authorization and get approval and attend a conference in 2 weeks' time. You need to forecast. And as you all are going through annual evaluations coming up in January, February, March, I encourage you to take very seriously that cover letter that says, here's what I said I was going to do, and I nailed it, right? And then the third piece of that form is, what do I project to be doing in the upcoming year? So if you have a conference or you have a journal article that you need to pay the open access fee for, the time to put that in and negotiate that with the dean and the chair and the director is during that annual evaluation. To me, in the past at other institutions, and what I encourage us to do at West Georgia is, if you say, I've got 3 international conferences and it's going to take $10,000 for me to present, and they're amazing. And if the chair signs off on that, then he or she are supposed to be penciling in that as part of the budget in the upcoming year. Because if they say, yes, that's a great target, but we don't have any money, it's at that point to talk about the support that you're going to get. If they say, yes, go for this, and you nail all 3 of those and you get accepts, and then say, oh, by the way, I don't have any money for that, that's something's broken, right? So please take that annual evaluation process seriously, especially in the projection into the future. It's not there just as a piece of the form. It's there so that you all can figure out what kind of support. And if the college looks at all this and says, wow, we need $200,000 to support our faculty in the conferences that they're projecting into in the journals, and we've only got 100 in the budget, let's have that debate earlier than later so that we can give you what you need. Great question. What else? Yes.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Mm-hmm.
So, I know for the spring, I built Monday, Wednesday, Friday sections. I know we had students populated into them, and I saw what you're talking about. They immediately left Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. I often go to Monday, Wednesdays. So, we're now currently trying to get our schedule for the fall, summer, the spring built before the break. That's what we're trying to get that resolved. And one of the things that was suggested was for the fall and spring and summer, not to offer any core classes on Monday, Wednesday, only Wednesday, Friday. Which that does solve them on the Monday, Wednesday courses. My biggest fear is that students will then opt out and not go to a Tuesday, Thursday, but go to equal. That's one of my biggest fears with, if we go away from Monday, Wednesday to just Monday, Wednesday, Friday, that we're going to lose more equal. That's my biggest concern. And I've seen that before.
Yes, DSEPs, I think you all had 1,000 seats that you were losing a few years ago to equal. So the question is, what you're asking me about thoughts on that?
Is that being, so one, should we be steering clear Monday, Wednesday, and just trying to devote our 4 courses to Monday, Wednesday, Friday? Which, I mean, in some ways it makes sense, in other ways that I think the 3 days is maybe the harder thing for students than the Fridays. And then what do we do if we start bleeding them into E4, which is good. I track E4 numbers, probably size seats every year, how many they have versus what we're getting. So my concern is next fall, I'll see a spike in E4, which means I am losing into E4. I just want to know if there is any thoughts on like unintentional consequences of losing students to E4.
Yeah, so first, and I know this came up last month, people had questions about scheduling. This is probably something we'll talk about every single month because it's a moving target. First, it's the pedagogical argumentation of what is the best approach to delivering the class. I was talking with Clint Samples earlier, and the example was an art course. They need a studio class that goes for 3 or 4 hours. And it would make absolutely no sense to have a studio art course that meets Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 50 minutes. And probably not at 8 a.m. either. You're an early riser and you're inspired at that, paint the sunrise. So the first question is what pedagogically makes the most sense. The next is diversity of offerings. So if it was only Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, then you're probably missing some of that Monday, Wednesday. People that want to take those gen ed core impacts courses, but they don't only be here 5 days a week. So again, we've got a number of students that are on campus, and then some that are commuting and they don't want to be here 5 days a week. So when you have a diversity of offerings, I had a great conversation with the marketing faculty a few weeks ago. And their example was the lower level courses are probably those that, you know, I can presume that you're on campus and maybe it's 3 days a week, or I'm assuming that you're going to be here 5 days a week. But once you get into those upper level courses, then you're probably doing an internship or you're working part-time as you've got 1 foot in student life and 1 foot in my professional career that I'm launching. So let's be aware of that as well. To be clear, there's no prohibition of Monday, Wednesday. But are we stepping on our own toes in Monday, Wednesday, Friday versus Monday, Wednesday? Probably to some extent. But like any scheduling, whether it's spring 26 or whether it was spring 2006, it's a moving target. And we will look at wait lists. We will look at UWG students that are taking E4 and can we reclaim them or at least advise them to say what are the differences. So I don't have a silver bullet or, oh, this is going to solve it all. The main focus first is what makes sense pedagogically. In some classes, maybe 3 times, maybe some 2, maybe 1. And then how do we create a diversity of offerings? I will say 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. are probably not real popular. So I don't know what was going on with that 5 p.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. My ask of the pre-registration was Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 10 a.m., 11 a.m., and 1 p.m. And we haven't, I mean, we've looked at geographic where people are. Interestingly, there was no pattern that emerged, right? Like you might say otherwise, but in your analysis, what I took away from that analysis that you presented was as a percentage, you got a lot of people coming out of Douglas County that's about on par for the same number that we're not wanting to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Got a question about that?
So related to this, I might not be remembering correctly because I was a young kid, I was 18, right, as undergraduate here. But I'm fairly certain when I was here in the early 2000s, you couldn't have, the departments were restricted. And so Monday, Wednesday classes had to start in the afternoon. They had to be like that 12:30 block, 2 o'clock block, 3:30 block. And then most of the Monday, Wednesday, Friday sections, some of them were awful. Our boss is not here today, but I had it for Calc 2 my first semester, 4 days a week at 8 a.m. Yes, it was awful. Okay, but most of them were the 9, 10, 11,
Yeah.
maybe even a 12. So like what I felt like I was experiencing with enrollment in the spring is I have a Monday, Wednesday, I think it's 10:30. No, it's the 9 o'clock one. So it's conflicting with 2 different time slots on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right? If they take a Monday, Wednesday, Friday 9, they can't take my class. If they take a Monday, Wednesday, Friday 10, they still can't take my class. So I'm just wondering if we've thought about trying to like separate those a little bit so that they're not conflicting with each other.
Yep.
Just a thought, because again, maybe someone, Farouk's been here since I was an undergrad, so maybe he remembers better. Again, I was a young kid, but I'm fairly certain Monday, Wednesday, Friday were basically morning. Monday, Wednesday started in the afternoon. So just a thought to put it out there, maybe that would help this some.
Some of the best practice, and I'm happy to readdress that. Like we've established kind of a standard schedule, so we're not. I think we had 88 or 89 different start times in the past. We've condensed that down so that it's more standard, but if we still have issues to improve, and I'm happy for the Faculty Senate to take that up and provide more input. I've been at places where, it was only Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, or the Tuesday, Thursdays were the lab days, the afternoons. So you can create clusters based on, well, our English classes are going to be on these days, our math classes are going to be these others, to try to avoid conflict. And I think that's part of the work that we're doing with ASCU is looking at best practices. We've got not only our 19 others in the cohort, but then we've got some readings and national standards that we can follow. Had a question here? Yep.
Exciting to hear that students are hearing about the scholarship of faculty at West Georgia and are interested in attending for reasons that showcase our work. When Dr. Johnson came to our University College meeting earlier this year, I mentioned how I wonder how, or if a focus on teaching, excellence in teaching might also be a way to not only recruit students to our institution, but to keep them here. I know that retention is a big issue. So I'm wondering how we're thinking about closing that loop on the research that we're doing outside of our class and the grants we're getting and our students participation perhaps in those sort of efforts.
Yeah.
Or even our teaching of that, scholarship to our students. Or lastly, the scholarship of teaching and learning in general. I know the IFB is already doing a lot of work to support us, kind of getting those publications out. It would be interesting to see a focus on that sort of excellence as well.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning. I think IFE, Mandy's leaning in on, we've got all these DFWI data on, out of the metrics dashboard the USG's created. And she's leaning in on not just offering things out of IFE, but working with the deans to say, here's what the data suggests in various courses, section variants and so forth. So not just preaching to the choir, but taking that to those courses that could benefit from. But I love the idea of not only talking about the scholarship of our faculty as a selling point, and oh, you get to work with world-class faculty leading in research, but also scholarship of teaching and learning. I don't know that that's part of their vernacular, except to say, oh, our faculty are excellent, and they're not only worried about their disciplinary expertise in the content, but how do you teach that and how do you convey that is important. So you've given me some homework. I'm going to take that with Mandy and see how do we convey that in a language that lands with the 6-7 generation.
A crystal on, because I did take
Yes,
part in the
QEP,
QEP
absolutely.
Institute this summer with Amy as well, and was so inspired by that. Workshop. So
Yeah.
things like that.
Thank you. Good suggestion. And I think it really talks about the narrative of, and you've heard me say this before, if higher ed just focuses on content, we're missing out on so much that students need. It's what happens outside the classroom. And you all are experts in your content, but you're also experts in how do you convey that and how do you create experiential learning like through our QEP and career readiness. That you know that you can get a full schedule when you come here, which isn't necessarily true of all places. And you're going to have a job before you graduate. Those are bookend targets for us. Good point. Other questions or thoughts? Yeah.
Back to this project 909. So give or take half of the students kept the schedules that were filled out for them. Are we actually seeing that the other half is still, are they still at West Georgia? Or is there, I don't know, do you know that? Where are they?
Correct me, about 10% fall to spring. And we're not seeing a drop, right? If anything, they're transferring into other classes.
So they are staying.
Yes, and we have seen a steady rise in our fall to spring retention and even our first and second year retention, right? Obviously, we need, there's always room for improvement. But people are not looking at that and going, oh, you hate me because you put me in a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm out. If anything, at least it creates a psychology of, oh yeah, I need to be in classes. And I'll point, we ran the numbers about a month ago at the beginning of November. Year over year credit hour production was up 56%. Like first week of November 25, first week of November 2024. Now, we are not going to grow as an institution by 56%, but what that does say is that students have registered for classes or we have pre-registered them earlier. So we're not waiting until December 30th or January 10th to sign up for classes. It's that presumption of you're going to stay here and we're going to advise you earlier. You mentioned schedule building a moment ago. Yes, schedule building and publishing that schedule is earlier, which does present its challenges. And I'll reiterate again, even though we're publishing syllabi early before classes open for fall 26, that doesn't mean you can't change them, right? So again, we have flexibility, but by USG policy, we need to publish these before registration begins. Students need to know as much detail as possible. That does not prevent faculty from improving the classes before classes begin in August. But we are doing a good job of getting more students to register earlier. And I hope that that translates longitudinally into longer retention and better graduation rates.
Thank you. That's not encouraging.
It is. And yeah, they might be going into a Monday, Wednesday instead of.
Yeah, but they're not going.
Yeah. And I think we had some hiccups in, we tried to avoid this with student athletes and then they're like, oh, I can't take this one. Yes.
This is a suggestion which is actually building up on Jenna's suggestion. For a while, I've been thinking that it would be great for our university to host the National Council of Undergraduate Researchers Annual Conference, NCUR, because it attracts the best students from around the country. And it's just a quick way to, right, raise the profile of the university.
Yep.
And for the entire community, the entire state to see this is the level that, that we're playing. I know that it's a multi-year process. I know that it's rather involved. But just as perhaps as a goal, maybe throw it out there and say, is there interest in your part from the provost?
For my part, absolutely. Anything that raises our profile, whether it's D1, whether it's hosting momentum at a state level, whether it's hosting in Kerr. It's a heavy lift, but that ROI and visibility and recruiting.
Yeah. So anyway, that's because we're already doing it, University of College, we are already hosting major conferences. And I know the psychology department used to host their own, so I think we have a lot of expertise.
I agree. We'll just take all of that in-Kerr travel and then put it towards hosting, right?
There you go.
Love it.
Sal, have you ever been?
Plus more.
I personally, I've sent many students, I send them every year, but there's always some conflict. But I get the students.
Chat later and I'll give you my thoughts about it.
Oh, yeah. Let's do it.
There's always a counter argument.
I looked at this in the past, I just didn't,
Yeah.
Carrollton has grown.
Yes, but it's hotels and it's capacity and, I mean, yes, we've got some construction going off the square, but yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of different things.
Yeah.
But happy to chat.
There's a lot of dimensions to that for sure.
Yeah, but years ahead, it doesn't have to happen next week.
But let me piggyback on that and say also, we can host speakers, right? Last year, we had a great speaker in philosophy. Really has helped boost the numbers there. So I encourage you all also to think, maybe we're not hosting in Kerr, but can you bring nationally recognized speakers to UWG? And the cost of that is often cheaper than sending some faculty to another place. And then it just we can do PR around that and use that to leverage for recruiting and just cachet to the institution. So as you've got colleagues and ideas around that, please share them with your deans and happy to talk with you as well. Dean's invited speaker series, presidential invited speaker series, institutional. We can do these at an institutional level. Other questions or thoughts? I know you've got agenda, big changes, so I don't want to keep us from that, but. Well, let me offer then, if you've got other thoughts, please reach out to me. Hope you have a wonderful holiday. Look forward to seeing you all at commencements next week. And thank you for everything that you've done to enable those students who are crossing the stage next week to have that moment. They wouldn't be there if not for you. We wouldn't be here if not for them, but it works both ways. We can celebrate those graduates because of the great work you've invested in them over the years. Thank you. Bill.
All right, thank you all. So I don't have many updates today. I do want to be as efficient as possible. I know all of us are hitting bandwidth walls at the moment, so I do want to say that related to moving through the rest of our agenda, we've had a transition in leadership of the undergraduate programs committee. So Charlie has done awesome work. This is going to be his last meeting as UPC chair, and Stacy Boyd is graciously going to be picking up the reins of UPC. So very appreciative for that. That being said, do any other committee chairs have anything they would like to address before we move on? You see Charlie, bring it on down.
Okay. Earlier today, we got a notification regarding something that was on the agenda. I'm sorry?
We're good on that.
Oh, we're good on that?
Yeah, we're good on that.
Okay, all right, great. All right, we don't have to vote on that.
We thought we had a question.
Yeah, we thought we had a question that's been resolved. So everything else that we voted on the November 19th meeting has been added to the agenda. So I'd like to go ahead and call this for a vote. Are there any objections to voting? Can I get a second? I need to get a second. Okay. All in favor of the UPC agenda that's attached, say aye or raise your hand.
Raise your hands. Raise your hands.
Sorry. Any noes? Any abstentions?
Thank you for everything. DPC.
So, GPC had 3 items on this agenda and I've received no questions so far. If anybody has any, get those now. So, all in favor of these 3 proposals submitted by GPC? Thank you. Any opposed? Or any abstentions? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so what we are going to do today is have a discussion about research and what research looks like at UWG. So in order to get us all on the same page, I want to situate us with a common understanding of what research is. And in order to do that, I was helped by a colleague to draw my attention to, and I think all of our attention to, the definition on the subject, the one that matters. So when we are interested in research, we're interested with research because in terms of why we're here, it relates to our Carnegie classification. So in order to get our Carnegie classification, Carnegie consults the HERD survey that accounts for research expenditures of institutions. The HERD survey therefore defines research and development research as we see here. So research and development is creative and systematic work undertaken to increase the stock of knowledge. The rest of y'all are in the room because you can read. So I'm gonna let y'all do that. I would encourage you to please take a minute and just absorb this. And I have a couple questions. This is one of those times, like I tell my students in class, that I swear I will not call anybody out, but this will only work if we all actually exercise a little bit, and I'm gonna ask for some hands to go in the air. So if the research has defined from what you see here, has been critical in getting you to where you are today professionally in any way, shape, or form, creative and systematic work undertaken to increase the stock of knowledge. Pretty broad definition. Can you please put your hand up? Thank you. So that's the vast majority of y'all in the room. I recognize that there may be some differences for those of us who are on tenure track and those of us who are in different positions. So for those of you who are, you all represent programs all across the university. So for those of you who are in tenure track positions and represent programs that have tenure, how many could you stick your hand up if doing this is incredibly important and in many ways determinative for advancing in tenure and promotion in your careers, in your programs? Y'all stick your hands up, please. So we'll note that the vast majority of hands are in the room. I'll note that more hands are up for that question when I ask you to speak about your colleagues and the other one. So because there are a variety of disciplines represented in the room, and this is by design, a very broad definition for what research is, I think it's important that as representatives of our colleagues, we take some time and discuss exactly what this looks like for us. What does research mean in our disciplines? How do we, what's the final product? Is that a publication? Is it something else? How do we assess that? How are we held accountable for doing that? What's that? So if it is in our tenure and promotion standards, what's that look like? I think now's a good time to just cross-pollinate some of that knowledge. So we have in the past had some small group discussion to get the juices flowing in that. I'm not sure that we need to do that, but if we would like to do that, we can. I just want to turn it over. So if anyone wants to start in your discipline, what's this look like? This is an extremely general definition. Tell me what's this look like in your discipline, and talk to me a little bit about that promotion and tenure and advancement. What do we have to do? What boxes have to be checked in a concrete sense? If we get a lot of silence, then we will do small groups. Shelley.
Coming from a field that's more creative in the arts, this is always very hard because one, the perception of what we do I'm in theater is, oh, that's fun and magic. And the rehearsals that we do, I mean, we're here 6 days, faculty and students are here 6 days a week at night, 5 days a week at night. 1 day a week and the weekend, rehearsing 3.5 to 4 hours. And so that kind of research is taken for granted often and not thought of as even, especially when it's done here rather than outside. There's also, I think we're not probably alone where you have artists who are going outside and doing creative work, get a little bit of pay for it, and then it becomes, again, a little bit more convoluted in terms of if the outside employment doesn't get approved, right? And it's considered employment when it is our research, our professional development for promotion. So I'll lay that out there.
It's appreciated.
This came up when we were trying to define undergraduate research. And although it applies very well to experimental natural sciences, my inclination was to call it research and scholarly and creative activities, or research and discipline-specific scholarly and creative activities. I think Dr. Newton was part of some of these conversations, so that I'm thinking of Dr. Elmer's discipline, also music and art, where one need not necessarily have a published peer-reviewed article, but one would have a performance or an equivalent thereof. And so perhaps we need to broaden this discussion and not just include the word research, because it can be either restrictive or misleading.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think I'll just step back and just speak for me individually. When I look at this, I actually see, although they do use the language of research and development, I think a strong argument can be made that some of the work that we've actually already discussed can be subsumed into this. Yes.
So I've been chair of the department now for almost 4 years, so I look at everyone's, feed as frequently when writing annual evaluations. I oversee political science and criminology. When I talk about research, I've always felt that, or even though West Georgia builds a teaching institution in so many ways, we still publish our parish, but fundamentally, for almost any of our faculty to gain tenure, you have to publish. So I would say probably the majority of the faculty in DCEPS has published a monograph. I know my class year, I had one grad faculty member published 8 peer-reviewed journal articles, had multiple books published. You and I published a book together, I published a couple. Sal here published piles of articles. For us, you must do research. Most of our folks have published monographs, almost everyone published journal articles. But one of the things that scared me is that I was able to obtain a full professor without ever applying for a research grant, because I don't fundamentally need grants to conduct my research. So that's just something that I think about with the social sciences, is a lot of us can do research without grants.
I would actually qualify what it said. I think it's possible for us to conduct some aspects of our research, but it is obviously also really important to get different kinds of funding. So we don't necessarily need the $1 million or $500,000 that is natural sciences need. Sometimes we need just a little bit of money to get us going. Like for me, I only need $3,000 to launch a research project, and that's just to purchase the statistical software and then pass it to the data. And I'm saying that because I just applied to a grant asking for $3,000. And with that, I can do a lot. And so there is, it's just that how big the grant can be sometimes. It's also plus, from my own experience, while I do a lot of quantitative work for the most part, I also translate poetry. Because that's what tickles my fancy. So, to me, that still follows falls within the basic research experience because I'm, interested in knowledge of humankind, of culture, of society. And so even at the most basic level for me, that fits squarely into the basic research. May not be experimental or applied per se, but it's still definitely basic. And I would even put Shelley's in the basic right there because it says it doesn't have to, without any particular application or use in view. You don't have to have it on, be basic.
That computer that you're using to translate the poetry with is an expense.
Absolutely.
Other perspectives? There's some different disciplines there.
And then, in some fields, so I'm a geologist, in some fields, there's the obvious peer reviewed route, and then, which many of us understand that process, but then there's also opportunities to provide like sensitive reports or clientele that need our industry or need our skill set. And like our program is very supportive of that because many of us are licensed professionals, but I would be curious if those same works were being assessed in the college, there would be questions of, well, this isn't peer review. And I know that's not up there, but just on a local scale, I know that sometimes in an institution, there's different cultures of what's acceptable, what's not. So anyway, that's just a statement that was that. Because the private nature of the work, can't have a bunch of people reviewing what you're writing for a Fortune 500 company, right? So.
Yeah, I think that's a fundamental reason why we're having this conversation is as human beings, we respond to incentives and like extremely relevant incentive for many of us, and especially folks who will be bringing in as junior colleagues, that promotion and tenure standard is going to be, and to a degree for all of us, the annual review and post-tenure review, those standards are extremely important for all of us. So we need to have conversations of what counts and what doesn't, and how much certain things count. So I know that the gold standard for in many fields is peer review, but there's a lot of other good work that meets this criteria that is happening. So I think it would be an important conversation for us to bring back to our colleagues and make sure we are looking at those criteria as fulsomely as been. Other perspectives, what types of work are you doing? And what incentives are you responding to? I will reframe and add another follow-up question. If we are doing this, if we're doing a little bit less of this than we used to, what's inhibiting us? What's holding us back? What barriers need to be overcome so that we are doing more of this? What additional incentives do we need?
So like in education, we have the school district barriers. In addition to IRB, we have school districts, because if you want to do research that involves children, you have, or board of regulations, you have a lot more like barriers. I guess nursing can be kind of in the same boat. Whereas some other disciplines may not have as many outside of IRB barriers or hurdles to jump through.
It does. That's good. Please.
I would say time, for probably more of us than I realize, but I know for first year writing, first year math, we have very full course load, so, it's typically kind of a 4-4 track, sometimes 5-4, and then we often have overloads. And so I am at a stage, I've been at a stage these last several years, so I can't imagine trying to fit in anything else. And in addition to service. I'd love to have.
Yeah, I'd be curious. So just for efficiency's sake, let's get some exercise. That resonates with me. Time is my biggest barrier. So how many of y'all would say time, access to time is my biggest hurdle for dealing with research? Yeah, so vast majority of hands. So let me steer the question a little bit further and say, if time is the biggest hurdle to being productive on this front, what needs to happen to lower that hurdle? Group?
Can you go back to your earlier question?
Please do.
And, Dr. Preston will be amused by this because about 4.5 years ago, when we were interviewing for a new provost, I showed up for every single meeting, including his, and talked about having the resources to acquire. And if it is acquired through external grants, maintain instrumentation, which is state of the art and expensive, so that students can actually work on it. And I think that all these years later, while we have made great strides, and while several of us have been very successful, it still remains a challenge to maintain instrumentation in a timely fashion.
It's a good point. Thank you. So somebody volunteered. Please do. I appreciate that.
So many people on this campus have responsibilities to research as it's in our, our workload expectations. So we all should be doing, in theory, goal amount of whatever percent, we're contracted to do. But I would say, just looking at my own time, which I log, part out of pettiness and part out of just trying to be organized. In truth, I'm doing a lot of work that a chair of geosciences would be doing. Of course, that role doesn't exist, and that instead, with your responsibilities, I go up to our directors who are doing the best they can, but those are undesired and unmanageable workloads. So in this past week, I probably did 5 hours of work that was just related to filling in gaps of our management structure. And that's typical at this time of this semester, every year, every semester.
How broadly does that resonate? Just wanted to, significant number of months. Or
Anecdotally, I mean, since I've been here in 2015, watching the sort of the way that our management system has been reorganized, that has been the largest impediment to, I mean, I'm not just speaking personally, I mean, in the ways that our program has been able to function, when we assess one another's and talk to each other about our commitments to teaching and service and research, and take a log of honest time spent on service, when it's not unusual at all to get estimates on hourly, weekly contributions to service in the 270% of your service assessment rather than the 100%, which ostensibly, I guess we should cut ourselves off at 100%. There's no question that if any of us did that, that a huge portion of the work that's necessary to keep our students here and have them be successful would not be done. And those are service hours that they're mutable in the sense that the second that there's a dearth of time here or a dearth of contribution here, you can step in and you can figure out a way to get things done, and we do that for our students over and over again. They're also hard to track. And so when your annual evaluation is populated with all the things that you step forward to handle in that category, the bucket has been full the whole time, and you keep loading it. It's an invisible contribution to some degree, but it definitely is always going to be an expenditure of time that keeps us from that other mission.
yeah, and I think we need to be explicit to what we're discussing when it comes to service, because I think for many of us, when we track service, we think of the really easy to put on a piece of paper service, like what committee we're on, and I think, but for most of us, that's not what we have in mind right now. When we're talking about taking our time, we're talking about we're helping a student in our office solve an administrative issue that there used to be an administrative manager down the hall that could deal with, or we're helping our student look over their resume for an internship that, they used to have somebody that they could talk to about that. So this is not just like I'm starting on too many committees. So I want to be clear about that. There's a lot of people that pick up on that, let's deal with committees, and it's not, but I think we're talking about it. If anybody disagrees with me on that, please correct me.
No, that's a really important point.
Except that program coordinator maybe could handle, but if it's their first year as program coordinator, it's almost senseless to keep making them just in this abusive circle of doing all of this work, so people step in. And you'll see when you look at
the amount of publications someone has from the people who don't step in, the people who do step in, there are very big differences.
I'll give you an anecdote that my colleague Sal and I were just talking with a Spanish professor earlier today with a student who was interested in studying the classics. And it's like you've got two political scientists and a Spanish professor trying to help a student look for someone who could deal with. It's like, that's what we're talking about. And we're doing that because there's nobody in this building who's paid to be there 40 hours a week to deal with questions like that.
By the way, we send it to you.
So I'm sorry, we have another, I think Jenna was up. Please.
I think something that we've all been faced with the past couple of years too, and this goes back to my earlier comment on teaching sort of, is the AI thing. So much, I can speak for my writing colleagues, so much of our time and attention has changed, has had to refocus. And I've said, positively, AI has made me a better teacher, kind of, because I've had to be more experiential and create better assignments and all those things. I don't know if you said the invisible bucket or whatever, that's where you just think that bucket has been really heavy.
Yeah, on the teaching.
Teaching side.
Buckets,
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's nobody's fault, but that's just the thing.
So one thing that I know, thinking about the faculty in my department. So in criminology, in the 3.5 years that I've been chair, we went from 12 full-time faculty to 7, lost 5. We haven't placed any. Political science, we had 12, and I think we're at 9 now, so we lost 25%. So to help mitigate this, we went from course caps of 40 to course caps of 60. So we functionally, every faculty member is more than a load in how many students they have. The MPA program is growing like crazy. So the courses that used to have 15 students, I have one right now that I have a faculty member who has 45 students in a graduate MPA course, and she's also teaching 2 additional courses face to face. So I have no earthly idea when she would have time to do research. And I think that when you look at political science, every faculty member is a full professor, but one who's an associate. We're very senior laden, and our caps are getting larger. There's fewer faculty members. We have less staff support because the building, we have a lot of bleed off there. So you said we're picking up more functions all the time, more students, more burden, and then you play roles that you aren't used to. So then you have the research piece, and I think we still have a lot of people doing a lot of research, but I don't know when the hell they found the time. But so there's more and more of this as course caps get larger, and we have not hired anyone new as a permanent professor for 3.5 years. We've lost 10.
Thank you. Some other perspectives on what research looks like, what's standing in the way, how we're holding accountable, how we can better incentivize. The time piece is where the direction is going. I'm not entirely surprised by that, but Jason?
Space. I mean,
Yeah.
time is really important, but in some of our disciplines, definitely you could write a grant and get the instrument for the lab. But in the arts, it's quite different. And especially sometimes the amount of time that it takes to develop a body of work can be an ongoing year after year process. And if you have physical barriers in the way, you can't really do the best job that you can of your scholarship. So space and also financial. Because if we have to pay out of our own pocket for the things that grants cannot provide for us, or the grant would get in the way of what the narrative is in the work of art, then we have a lot of those barriers.
Thank you, Jason. I think that's important because one of the benefits of having so many disciplines in a room, we have things like Farouk talking about, we need to maintain this equipment, and you're talking about, we need the space, the time, sometimes travel, sometimes certain populations and certain research limitations we need to deal with. What else we have, folks? Please.
I'll be positive. I will say, so in the last year, I received the faculty seat grant, and that was
well, I've not met my goal of following up and submitting a formal grant for a bunch of reasons, somewhat related to just funding opportunities disappeared and things like that. It was very encouraging. It was an encouraging process. And so if that's something that the institution can maintain, having those opportunities was very encouraging for faculty.
Some of the comments that I've heard from faculty, and we've already talked about a little bit, is when there is funding available, thinking through carefully about where the points of control and what processes are available to get that, make sure they're as efficient as possible. I know that resonates with a lot of you. What other comments do we have? I don't want to beat this to death. So a couple things that I'm hearing, time is a super important one. We need to probably make sure we're regularly checking in with our programs to make sure that our P&T guidelines, et cetera, are where they need to be. Make sure everything's reflected in there, whether it's peer reviewed or not peer reviewed. Let's do that housekeeping. Let's encourage our colleagues to do that housekeeping. As an institution, let's think about how we can solve this time problem. And and leadership want to chime in and respond to any of this, or I don't want to put you on the spot, but I just want to give you the opportunity.
Thank you for all great comments.
Good. Any concluding thoughts? I absolutely want to make sure that we adjourn fairly early today. If there is a meeting in the year that we should adjourn early, it's the December meeting. That's always my view. So.
This has been very positive, this conversation. I think also you need to consider what we have here at our disposal that actually serves, not as a barrier, but actually helps us to maybe that we want to leave that for a different location to come back in and say, how are we working with each other, helping each other, collaborating, et cetera? How are we, despite our challenges, how are we still, moving forward? Because I think that there's that other positive side that I think we highlight is a lot of people are doing great work. So I think it's really important to also bring it back to the conversation. So I've had collaborations with 480 and many other people all over the campus, and that's something that I always encourage people to look for people who are doing things that are, interesting to you and just work with them. But anyway, I think that could be a larger conversation about how can we help each other? What can we do? What are we doing great?
Yeah. So on that front, a few concluding points. I do want to get with the executive committee. I think that'd be the most appropriate body to discuss with Brian how we can efficiently catalog everything that is going on and then tie it in with the annual review process or whatever makes the most sense. Second thing, because this kind of has been negative, I want to give you all the opportunity to brag on your colleagues. Just throw your hand up. How many of your colleagues or you yourself have however you define that output, whether it's a book, whether it's a peer-reviewed article, how many of y'all just said something, hey, I did this and I did this in a really big way. Recently, my colleagues have done this. Yeah, there's a lot of this. I know despite these barriers, my colleagues are just cranking these things out. We got something doing multiple books a year, right? Yeah, it's crazy. So that's good. Plans for the future. So January, unless something crazy changes and we have to adjust course, the plan for January is to talk about that local economic impact point, how we can align towards that. February, we have on tap, we need to deal with AI. So we're going to have subject matter expert come in and one of our colleagues talk to us about AI and how we're going to have a big discussion on that. So that's where we're going. Rest of the spring, we'll see what happens. Thank you all so much for everything you do for all of us. Hope you all have a great break. We'll adjourn.
Yeah.
Yeah.